Hi, welcome to the Quilty Chicks block of the month, month 9. We're done with our chickens and now we're moving on to our flowers. We're going to be cutting all the pieces for the stems and leaves, making the stems and leaves, and then continuing on to our first flower head. Now, the most important thing as you go along is to pay attention to the orientation and layout directions. There is a left and right facing orientation to the leaves, and so placement of the leaf does matter. However, it's not going to be the end of the world if you come out with like 5 left hand facing and 3 right hand facing, like it's fine. So fabric, we have our stem strips and we have our leaf squares, and I'm using all the same fabric, but this would be a great chance to work in a lot of different greens. This would be a great opportunity to use some green scrap fabric and have a bunch of different leaves. There's also the background fabric, different sizes, and a ton of little baby squares. The first step is to sew one of these little baby squares onto corner of our leaf square, and we're sewing corner to corner and then cutting off the tip and pressing it under. Because these are so small, I can eyeball and sew from corner to corner without marking them, and I'm not, because I really hate marking. However, if you're not sure about that, go ahead and just mark a line, better safe than sorry, from corner to corner and sew right on that line. One thing that will save time in the long run is to pin these little squares down and to get all of these squares prepped before you go over to the sewing machine. Then you're not reaching for all of your little squares one at a time. It just goes a lot quicker when you do one step over and over again. Your brain and fingers get a lot better at it, a lot quicker. Honestly, I feel a little pressed for time today, but I'm still going to make all 8 of these leaf stem units because I know future Lila will be really grateful that today Lila made all those blocks for her, because it's not going to get any less busy in October, November, or December. And this way I'll have them all ready. I've got all of my leaves prepped, and I'm going to go over to the sewing machine and sew a seam from corner to corner. Now that we've sewn from corner to corner on this little background square, we need to sew from corner to corner on this background square. I still have these all attached, chain pieced, and I could totally sew across here and then take this next one and sew across there. However, I don't know. I don't like dealing with them when they're all connected. If you can do that, that is fine. But I'm gonna go ahead and just snip these apart and then sew them just like we did the other ones. Now that these are all clipped apart, we'll sew from corner to corner on the opposite side. Now we'll trim off the corner 1/4 inch from our seam line. This doesn't have to be exact. You can eyeball it a little bit. Just make sure it's at least 1/4 inch. You can also do this with a rotary cutter, but with short seams like this, I find the scissors to be easiest. Now, tomorrow Lila might be upset, but today Lila has kids coming home soon and is running out of filming time. So we're just going to make the stems for this month. I have 4 leaves here. I'm going to set the seams by just placing my iron on top of it. Oh, that stuck. And then we'll press these to this. We're going to press the fabric this way towards the grain. And that is a subtle thing that will just help the leaf fabric pop a little bit in the quilt. You can, of course, press the seams open if you're a press opener. That is just fine. I'm just happen to be a press to the cider. And notice how I'm kind of holding down the tip with my iron, kind of pulling it open on the other side and just making sure, using the iron to press the fabric to the side. We've got our leaves. These are identical, so we don't have to worry about right or left facing leaves right now. Where we're going to worry about it is as we follow these layout instructions. All right, we're going to interrupt this tutorial with a public service announcement. Double check your measurements before you cut. Otherwise, you might cut 3.5 inch squares and sew a whole lot of them when you really need a different size. So I've recut. I'm going to resew, and then we'll put it all together. Now that I have the correct size leaves, it's time to lay everything out. So this is why it's good to have these labeled so that you can tell which pieces you're working with really easily. But just refer to the pattern and lay all the pieces out. And pay attention to the leaf orientation. And there, so that's the first set of leaves. To make sure these don't get mixed up, I would go ahead and pin now so that you don't accidentally move something the wrong way when you get over to the sewing machine. All right, these are ready to be sewn. But first, I'll lay out the next set of leaves. We have, just like the other set, one that goes kind of up to the left and one that goes up to the right. The difference is the size of fabric that goes on each one of them. On the other set of leaves, the leaves were kind of in the middle of the block. But on these ones, they're more towards the top. So you have kind of staggered leaves that look really cute on the finished block. All right, I'm going to pin and go sew these up. After you've sewn the background pieces onto your leaves, refer to the last diagram for placement of the leaves. I've done that. I have checked twice because we're just, I don't know, it's one of those days where mistakes happen. All right, then all we have to do now is add the long stem. With the background rectangles, I pinned both sides at once, but I think with this narrow of a strip, it would be really awkward. So I'm going to pin this, press open, and then add this additional leaf onto it. That means I will need to double check my layout when I get back here. I've gone ahead and sewn the stems on to the left leaves, and now we'll sew them on the right, onto the right leaves. But before I do, I'm going to press the seam open. Pressing it open right now before it's attached to the other side just makes it less difficult to work with. Sometimes getting those narrow seams open when they're attached to something else, those narrow strips open, is a pain. So I set the seam. Setting the seam is really important when you're doing long strips and pressing long seams. And notice how I'm just doing a section of it at a time. Okay. Just keep on referring back to that diagram. Double check, triple check, quadruple check that we've got the leaves. And actually, if you accidentally did something like this, it doesn't matter in the long run, right? Like, it's just a cute flower, and there's variation. So, which is why I did it like this anyway, to add a little bit of variation. So if there are mistakes, do not unpick, just go with it and give your quilt a little extra character. I'll go sew the final seams now. Now to press our final seam, we'll set the seam and then press open. And when I'm done pressing the blocks, I like to give them a little spray of water, just regular old water, and set those seams and really go over that block one more time. It is very important when your fabric is wet not to iron back and forth. That can distort the fabric. Now, if your block was a little bit wonky or some of the seams were doing weird things, that distortion can work for you, and you can kind of give it a little pull and straighten it up if you need to. Two cute little stem and leaf units. We're going to use these blocks on the bottom of each of our 4 flower heads. So again, I encourage you to make all of these this month if you can. You can refer back to this video over the next 3 months if you do make them as you go and need a little refresher. All right, let's go make some flower heads now.